Hello, everyone, and welcome to the DBL's Moves at the Deadline. We'll be taking a real quick look at the big trades that occurred at this year's DBL trade deadline. So this season, there was only 5 moves made. Joining me to go through each of these moves is Fikey. Now, the first trade that we're going to look at was the Timberwolves moving Patrick Patterson and Derek Williams to the Bucks for Luke Maabunte and Alexei Shved. What do you think of this move?
Well, what really matters is if the Bucks make Shaved work. But if not, the Timberwolves, this is a clear win. I'm pretty sure they got either a second or 2 seconds in this trade too. So I think the Timberwolves win this trade with the tank.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's an interesting trade. In my opinion, Derek Williams is by far the best player in the move. Um, but Speed has the most potential. I don't know. I think Bucks are gearing up for a decent run this year. In most of my tests, they were running around 52 to 56 games, so it'll be interesting to see. Now let's take a look at the Timberwolves Clippers deal. So I talked about this in the last video that we had. Um, Basically, the Timberwolves traded away undrafted free agent Nick Calas and a second round pick for Willie Green, Alfred Aminu, and Jervis Vasquez and a second. What do you think about that, Fikey?
I think the Clippers are losing this trade because I think the Timberwolves, man, they are building the best tank I've seen in a while. It might master the Kings trade that was going to happen before with the amount with that the Heat are about to get, and then of course the Denver Nuggets.
Yeah, I mean the way I'm looking at the Timberwolves trade here is they moved a guy who could have maybe been a 1 or 2 time All-Star at most. Like this guy wasn't going to be a superstar, and they traded him for 3 role players. They're clearly tanking. There isn't a question there. The Timberwolves don't need Calith. He is only going to hurt their salary cap, and they moved him for 3 quality players. And the Clippers, they lost a lot of depth here. I mean, Vasquez was one of their best players off their bench, and they got Calith, who's in a brief stint since has underperformed. So it's going to be interesting to see if they can, um, you know, make this work, or if they just mortgaged their win now for a guy who's going to be a bust with them, so to speak. So now let's look at a little bit of a different trade. It's a little bit smaller scale. The Knicks traded away Matt Barnes, who's like he's a backup player, quality role player. But the Pistons sent away Urepko and a second for him. This isn't really a big move. But what do you think of the Pistons' title chances this year? Do you think they got any?
Uh, to be completely honest, I do not think the Pistons have a chance. I mean, when you have to face the Bulls or the Pacers in the second round just to make it to the Eastern Conference Finals, I just don't see it.
Yep, I'm in the same boat here. I mean, yeah, I don't think it's a horrible move because, frankly, Urepko in a second isn't a ton to give up. But it's not like they really had a reason to do this move in the end to begin with. So now we're going to take a look at 2 trades. I'm actually really glad we got him in studio to talk about. So we have Fikey here. So he's made a couple moves. One of his moves is he traded away Sean Livingston to the Pistons. So we'll get to hear from him on that. And we'll also get to hear directly from him on moving Dwayne Wade, who he acquired in exchange for Bosch and a first-round pick. Now, something I want to take before we start getting Fikey's thoughts on these trades, I just want to kind of state my own background here. Dwayne Wade, he is a 64 overall, which is the worst overall you can have in DBL. The reason? 64th auto test free agency. Does a 61? It does not. So Chris Bosch can come back if they want him to. There is no guarantee Wade is coming back to Sacramento when his contract's up. Now, Fikey, I was just hoping you could elaborate a little bit more on these trades. Tell me if you think you're conceding a win or a loss in these deals. And do you think Sacramento or Detroit, I think you've already said Detroit you don't think's going far. Do you think that Sacramento could go far?
I think Sacramento is a clear contender for the finals. If they do not win it this year, it is tragic as they've traded pretty much all of their future assets for LeBron James and D Wade, who will both test free agency at the end of this year. So for me, I was looking at this like I could bring Chris Bosh back as a great guy to help lead this young group going into the future. And also it helps my personal tank to allow me to try and get a better pick. For the Sean Livingston deal, the Pistons GM came up to me and asked if Sean Livingston was on the board. And I said, sure. He offered me Casper Ware and a 2018 second. And I mean, Sean Livingston in the grand sting of things will not be a major part of this team. So I said it's okay to trade him, and I pulled the trigger.
Yeah, I think you're completely right there. When you're looking at long-term assets, in 2 years we aren't going to even be mentioning Sean Livingston. He's going to be probably on the verge of being out of DBL. And even if he isn't, he's probably not going to be anything more than a at best decent bench player. Picking up a second for something like that is always useful. Um, so overall, I'd actually say that the Dwayne Wade deal was a complete win-win. I think you're right. Sacramento has to be one of the favorites in the West. So now we're actually going to take a look at some questions. The first question, this is coming from DD Savage, is he wants to know: do you think Chris Anderson, the Birdman, is better than Michael Jordan? Now I'm gonna contextualize this and try to help DD out here. I think he means, is peak Birdman better than current DBL Michael Jordan, who would be 52 years old?
Man, all I have to say is it's Birdman, man. It's just Birdman. Of
All right.
course, Birdman's better. I
Yeah.
mean, he's 52. He has no athleticism. If Jordan was to come back, which I think would be very cool, but I don't think it would happen. I think that Birdman wins on one, 21-0.
Yeah, I mean, this is an interesting situation because I don't know if you've heard the story, but Gerald Henderson, his biggest NBA accomplishment was he beat Michael Jordan in the game of horse, and it doesn't seem like a big deal, but when you think about it, Michael Jordan isn't actually the world's greatest jump shooter. He's a great player, one of the goats of all time, but not the best jump shooter in the world. And he lost to Henderson without his athleticism. I don't know if he could beat against a I think 7 foot tall Chris Anderson, and Chris Anderson has one of the largest wingspans in the league. So now we'll take another question. This question is, give me 1 second to pull up. Um, what team do you think is in the worst position long term? Uh, this question specifically means, which team do you think has the least assets and such, and is going to be in a title drought, so to speak, the longest? Not necessarily the team that's worse right now, because there's some really bad teams that have tons of assets. So I'm a real quick switch over so you guys can see the transactions. Here you guys go. All right, so you guys should be able to see now the transactions page, and I'm actually going to hop down and we'll take a look at some of the bottom feeders here. So, in my opinion, the team that might be in one of the worst positions in the league um, is probably. Ooh, I want to say, I mean this in the nicest way, Brooklyn. They've traded a lot of their first round picks. They have an aging roster and realistically only 1 to 2 years left of playoff potential. And then their roster's young guys are Marshawn Brooks, who he's averaging 11 points, but he's not a superstar, doesn't really have superstar potential. Hayden Siva, who was a second round pick. And other than that, they only have one other 23-year-old with 53 or higher potential, and that is Solomon Hill, who was also a second round pick. This isn't a team with a lot of upside long term, so they're my worst team long term. Fikey, what's your worst team long term?
For me, I think it's a toss-up between three teams. It's either the Los Angeles Lakers, the Sacramento Kings, because they've traded all of their picks, and the Toronto Raptors. I
All right,
mean,
let's
you just drafted a bust at first. I mean, it's pretty
yeah,
bad.
let's first talk about the Lakers, and then we'll move over to the other two. All right.
Yeah.
So
So the problem with the Lakers is Kobe is getting worse and worse every year. Dwight seems to be on the decline. Iggy seems to have hit his max. And with all of them going down on major contracts till 2018, I can only assume that they're just not going to work. But they don't have any first round picks till I believe either 2018 or 2019.
yeah,
So
they've definitely mortgaged their future. They were definitely banking on Brandon Knight and Kenneth Faried becoming the stars. This is actually really interesting because both Brandon Knight and Kenneth Faried back in 2013, people thought, hey, look, these two guys, they're going to be big parts of the future of the NBA. Manimal and Knight were great players, and well, neither of them got there in real life, and frankly, they have a combined 24 PER with less than 20 points per game, less than 5 assists and less than 10 rebounds. They're not really producing, and I think that it's easy to blame the Lakers' long-term struggles on the two of them. Obviously, as long as Kobe is in LA, they're going to be a playoff contender, but they might potentially have that horrible bottom out. They have new GM Dane Mason, who's pretty accredited coming over from ABA, but I am definitely concerned. Now we're going to go take a look at another team that you mentioned, which is Sacramento. This team is exciting. I don't think there's anyone in the league that does not want this team to be in the finals this year. So, as I've stated before, we're basically in an alternate history here where LeBron's Big Three in Miami never won a ring and got blown up instead of the Lakers. LeBron ends up going to Sacramento. They've already retooled around him and added Wade to replace Bosh. This is a very interesting team featuring a actually productive Jimmer Fredette, a prime Spencer Hawes, a honestly productive bench Jeremy Lin, but they've also gone out there and they have some young guys. They have Robbie Hummel and Archie Goodwin, but I have to agree with you. They have no assets, and they have two guys who have absolutely no guarantee of developing. And outside of that, I don't really think that they have too much long-term future. I think they're definitely mortgaged for the win now. With this season alone, they have what, 8 guys expiring in free agency. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, 8 guys hitting free agency this year. So I do have to share a lot of your sentiments. Do you think they have a legitimate title chance this year?
I think they are right now the contenders in the West, and I think the only way they lose is if somehow the Pacers or the Bulls have a great run in the playoffs and can beat them. But right now, I think their biggest contender is in the West, in the OKC Thunder, who are built for success for the next 10 years.
I agree. I think Sacramento is definitely a lot more ready this year than OKC is. Um, and I think that ultimately, when you look at the top 3 teams in the league, or I'll say top 4 teams in the league, I think there's a pretty clear determination that that it is OKC and Sacramento in the West, and in the East, it's Indiana and Chicago. The East is deeper. Like, those top 2 teams are very deep, but they don't have the star power that the Western Conference teams do. Westbrook and Durant and DeMarcus and LeBron are better than any of the second or any of the duos in the East. Um, but I do want to take a real quick look, and we'll head over and take a quick look at their roster. Um, Chicago is a viable contender, but their entire roster is built around one player in Derrick Rose. And this is the same thing Indiana deals with, but with Paul George. They're deep, but outside of their number one star, they don't really have too much behind them. Whereas Sacramento has 3 players rated 64 or higher. Um, and this is something that is also perpetuated by Oklahoma City. So it's going to be very interesting to see how the playoff shakes out. Definitely feeling a little bit bad here for New Orleans and San Antonio, who both have better records than Sacramento, but after Sacramento acquires Dwayne Wade, I think it would be hard to argue with anyone that Sacramento isn't the number 2 team. So let's now take a look at the third team you mentioned, which is Toronto, coming off a season in which they had the first overall pick.
Yeah, I just don't see it, man. I mean, if you go down and look at Giannis, he's a 42 overall, 64, and he's getting 19 minutes and 3 to 4 field goal attempts a game, 4.3 points. I just don't see him being a success. I think this is a major bust, the first bust in DBL history.
Yeah.
I just want to see how this team goes forward, knowing that they've drafted a bust.
Yeah, I think that I hate to say it. At what point do you cut bait? Like, I know he's only played 23 games. I know he's a rookie. But at what point do you have to admit that he isn't going to be a superstar? You can't bank on him to be the franchise center in Toronto anymore. He isn't likely to develop that way. Sure, he could, but when you look at Toronto's roster, they should be focused on making the most of DeRozan's prime. Jonas Valanciunas has just as much, if not more, upside, in my opinion, at this point than Giannis. I know it sounds like crazy talk, but that's the reality that we're living. He had horrible progs for a rookie with so much potential coming from the first overall pick. Now, I have to ask, Spike, if you were in that draft room, if you had the first overall pick, would you have still taken Giannis? I know that hindsight is 2020. Would you have honestly taken him, or would you have taken Oladipo?
For me, I think at this point, if I had the first pick, I would be looking to trade down, man, because it seems like the value in this draft class came in the later picks, the later lottery, the later first round, the second round, the undrafted picks. I mean, if I'm them, I just trade down, give more picks in 2014, 2015, which we all know are very loaded. They're very loaded. Or maybe trade down to 8 or 9 and go get Noel or Gobert.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, right now you're looking at, unfortunately, this was a draft that was very, very weak. The only real sure thing that has come out of this draft to this point, and you can take a look and see, but to my understanding, um, with the exception of Dennis Schroeder, who was a late first round pick, and maybe KCP, there really hasn't been any guarantees in the top 10. The only players that really look like they're going to be productive are Nerwens Noel, who went at number 8 and has yet to play a game, and perhaps CJ McCollum as a backup shooting guard, with the asterisk of Cody Zeller and whatever the Knicks get out of Michael Carter Williams, who's been quietly productive but had miserable prog, so he's a mixed bag. Now, I think that's going to conclude today's segment. But what we're going to do is we're actually going to pop off now. This video is going to be uploaded for people to see, and then we're going to do, in maybe 5 minutes or so, we'll actually get going with the DBL race to the playoffs. And we'll actually bring that in live, and we'll have live people come on and be able to interact and ask some more questions and such. All right, Fikey?
Sounds great.
Awesome. Thank you for joining.